Welcome to episode 208 of the Various Sundry podcast. I'm your host, Matt Harmon, joined live from our virtual studio on the internet by my good friend, my colleague, my co-host, and the man who is preparing for landfall of Hurricane Sloat, John Scott Sloat.
The Sloats are descending on Fort Wayne. It's happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's happening.
Absolutely. So, well, we are recording well in advance because this episode drops on the day after Christmas.
And you are where when this episode drops?
Somewhere in either Iowa or Illinois on our way back from Omaha.
Okay, so you're driving home at this point.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. What will be going on with the Sloat family here?
We are in, I want to say, our last couple days of being together. So we'll be, I think we have plans to go to the zoo one day. I can't remember which day we're planning to do these things, but we're going to the zoo one day. I think it's going to be warm enough here that we're going to be able to be outside quite a bit.
Okay.
We may have a little bonfire in the backyard. We might walk. We have a little walking trail attached to our neighborhoods. We'll probably go on that at some point. Do some things like that.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, we will we'll be in the car. So I do have I think I've got a pretty good audiobook lined up, a true crime audiobook. So that tends to pass the time pretty quickly on the 11 hour drive on the way back.
What is it about like the true crime unsolved mystery genre that really works in an audiobook or a podcast? Like what is it about it?
Gosh, that's a good question. I'm not sure I have a good answer for that other than just the potentially if it has to be someone who's a good storyteller. The story has to be interesting in itself, but then the person telling the story has to be compelling in terms of the way that they put the story together, the way that they introduce the characters. I think part of what appeals to me about true crime is the sense of this could happen to like my neighbor, like these sort of ordinary people, not so much the high profile stuff, but the sort of this is an ordinary person that otherwise is unremarkable from the world's eyes. And suddenly this really crazy thing happens to them that embroils them in a story that they would have never imagined being a part of. That's my take. What about you? I mean, you enjoy a good true crime.
I do. I think it's for me, there's a deep sense of injustice going on. Like someone was killed and no one has been brought to justice for this. And even though it doesn't happen always in the podcast, you're just like, they need to figure out who did this. Or in the first great true crime podcast that really launched a genre, Serial, did he or didn't he do it?
Yes.
Either way, there's injustice or justice, and I think like bringing it to resolution, finding truth, I think is part of it for me.
Yeah. No, I think that's on the right track. We have reached, this is the last episode we're doing of 2023.
Yeah. Big pause there, Matt.
Well, I was still deciding whether we were continuing on next year. But this is the end of year 4.
Have we been doing this 4 years?
Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah. So if we were doing seasons, this would be the season finale of season 4.
I heard a statistic today on a podcast I was listening to that the average podcast only makes it 7 episodes.
I can believe that.
Like we are above average in that regard.
Yes. That was our goal setting out. Let's be above average.
Yeah. I think we are wildly consistent and in sitting down and doing this podcast week in and week out.
Yeah. Yeah. Even though when we set out, we did not commit to every single week.
But we've been up for 4 years.
Yeah. Now I feel like we're in it. Like, I
It's
think
kind of like Cal Ripken streak,
yeah. Yeah.
where they would do interviews with me like, actually, I really want a day off, but I can't take it because I've played so many games in a row
Yeah.
that I can't stop.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely what's going on here. Indeed. Indeed. Well, if you would like to get in touch with the show, you can find us on Twitter at VNS Pod. You can email the show, various and sundry podcast at gmail.com. We're on Facebook and on YouTube. And since it is, as you're probably listening to this, the day after Christmas, why not leave us a 5-star rating and a review? Why
Yeah.
not?
It's been a while since we've had one.
It's been a hot minute.
Well over a year at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right. So, since we are talking, this is our last episode of the year. We're doing this so far in advance. Our sports segment is going to be a little bit different since we can't talk about this past weekend's NFL slate or even the NBA games on Christmas Day. Which, by the way, do you watch any sports on Christmas Day? Typically,
yeah, I usually catch at least a half of the Knicks. Okay. Usually, they're on at noon.
Yeah,
always on Christmas Day. And then recently, there's been football games on Christmas Day, particularly with Christmas falling on a weekend the last few years. And so have caught some NFL games. So okay. Yes,
okay, excellent. All right. Well, we're going a little bit of a different route for this sports segment. Since it is an end of the year episode, we're going to talk just briefly about some favorite sports memories or stories from 2023. So, okay. Do you want to start, John, or you want me to start?
So why don't you go first? Because I don't want to steal yours because I just came up with one on the spot, and I hope it doesn't interfere with one of yours. So why don't you go first?
Well, as I thought about this, the first thing that came to mind was actually back in, I guess this would have been either late February or early March. I don't remember the specific day, but when Grace won the Crossroads League Conference Tournament Championship game, it was a home game, and they defeated Huntington University, despite the fact that Huntington led by as much as 18 points early in the second half. And Grace rallied all the way back. And it was the most electric atmosphere I've ever seen at a Grace home game. The place was absolutely packed out. And Huntington brought a good size contingent as well. And so when they were doing well, they were actually pretty loud. And so once Grace started the rally, it was even louder, just a remarkable atmosphere. The place went crazy. And probably the defining moment of that game, there was a point where Grace had just taken the lead for the first time with around a minute, 15, minute 20 left, something like that. And Huntington came down the floor, and Frankie Davidson blocked a 3-point attempt that then a Grace player picked up and threw ahead to him, and he dunked it. And that's the loudest I've ever heard that arena. It went absolutely berserk. So just a fun memory back from late February, early March. So nice. What about you? You were there, weren't you? You were at that game, were you not?
I believe I was. Yeah. Yeah. One of my favorite memories of the year is also Grace basketball. And it was just a month and a half ago where you and I actually ended up sitting next to each other at Grace versus Purdue.
Yeah.
And seeing Grace play in that big time arena and seeing our biggest guy in the NAIA, Elijah, at 6'10", 300 pounds, go against the biggest guy in the NCAA.
Yeah.
In Zach Edey. And he's just how much bigger he was
Yeah.
than everybody else.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And I just thought that was a cool day. A lot of alum came out, a lot of students came out. I was walking around the arena saying hello to people that I didn't know were coming to that game. It was pretty cool.
It was. It was. Yeah, for sure. I don't have a lengthy list here.
I have two more. I have
You have
two
two
more.
more? Okay, go for it.
So the Jets trading for Aaron Rodgers,
Yeah.
and coupled with that is September 11th, him running out of the tunnel with the American flag was like just tear inducing. Uh, and So he runs out of the tunnel with the American flag. That
Hmm.
stadium is crazy loud and excited. And then 4 plays in, the unspeakable happens, and the season down the tubes, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Tears the Achilles and it's done.
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember that was a Monday night game,
that was the first Monday night game, September 11th. Yep.
and I had my mentor group, so I wasn't watching the game. And uh we turned the game on probably mid to late second quarter. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, wait a minute. That's not Aaron Rodgers playing quarterback.
Yeah.
And so, of course, you do what you do these days. You go to Twitter to find out what happened. And so
Yeah.
I'm scrolling through and I'm like, oh my goodness. On what, like the fourth play of the game, he tore his Achilles. So I texted you immediately, of course,
Yep.
upon learning this, which I'm confident there were others who texted you checking on your well-being.
I had 7 or 8 wellness checks after that happened.
Indeed. Indeed. Yes. So, and you had one more.
Yes. The selling of the Washington Commanders for $6 billion.
That's a
Uh,
lot of money.
that's no sports team has gone for more. And yeah, I just buy the Mets a few years ago went for $2 billion, and that frankly that's just a lot of cash.
Yeah.
And it seems like the price and worth of those teams is just going up and up and up and up, regardless of um, regardless of performance. I mean, how long has it been since the Washington Commanders were any good?
Well, I don't know. It's been a while since they've made the playoffs.
So that coupled with, and this is another sports business story, but 700 million to Shohei Ohtani that we covered a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
That just wild contracts out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy amounts of money in the sports world for sure.
And
For sure.
it seems to be getting crazier year by
Yeah.
year.
Yeah. Yeah. You, do you wonder if there's a bubble coming? Like, obviously when the housing market gets overpriced, oftentimes you get a bubble, right? Where eventually
Sure.
it pops and then values drop. And same happens in the stock market, right? You get, you know, these markets that race super high, and then all of a sudden all the investors decide this is too high, it needs a correction, and then plunges it into, you know, a mini recession kind of thing. Like, do you think there's a bubble coming for the sports world?
Has there ever been a bubble in the sports world? I mean, has there ever
I
been
don't
a
know.
I just don't think so. I mean, maybe I guess it's possible, but
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think I think it's hard for me to conceive of that, but I suppose if the economy overall
yeah.
dropped enough for an extended period of time enough, you could maybe see that. I do think that uh I'm seeing I think it's going to get harder and harder for teams to get fans to physically attend games. I think that's happening in football in particular
Yep.
because the experience at home is so good.
So much better. Uh-huh.
I mean, you put it up on your big flat screen TV, you don't have to pay for parking, you don't have to fight crowds, you don't
You don't
have
got
to
to be
pay for
cold.
overpriced food, all these sorts of things. And honestly, oftentimes, depending on your seats, you probably see the game better from your TV than you do from the stadium, depending on your seats.
Well, there's part of me that goes, I think football and basketball are in better positions in the long term. Baseball is coming into a real issue where these big market teams with more money than anybody else are buying players for more money than other teams are worth, or more than their owners are
Yeah.
worth.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real problem for baseball. And I think something has to be done in the term. I don't know what that is, but
Right.
maybe that creates a bit of a bubble burst for maybe baseball. Something happens. The players union just has so much power, just so much power.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be the sport I would think is most likely to have a bubble that causes problems is
Yeah,
baseball out of the
yeah,
main ones.
yeah, yeah.
All right, John, it's time to move on. You ready?
Sure.
We are today talking about the top 10 theology stories as determined by Colin Hansen at the Gospel Coalition. So
Which
every year, go
I
ahead.
usually agree with Colin Hansen in his top 10. Usually.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think there's any, we might disagree at points in terms of like ranking them, but in
Sure.
terms of like what the top 10 is, I think he's usually pretty much spot on. So we'll have a link to this article in the show notes so that you can check it out for yourself. Um, but yeah, let's just he works through them backwards from 10 to 1, and I think we can do the same.
Sure.
I'll start. Number 10, Southern Baptist Convention disfellowships Saddleback Church over female pastors.
This feels like a 2022 story, doesn't it? This feels like it was well over a year ago.
You mean that it feels like it happened so long ago, or this was just the culminating moment in a story that stretches back a while?
I meant the first,
Okay.
right? This sort of like this feels like it happened a long time ago, but it does feel like a culmination of problems that have been going on for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think uh, this this is one of those things where it's a divorce that everybody could see coming. It was just a
Yeah.
matter of when.
Yep. Yep.
And this was not surprising. Apologies to any Rick Warren fans in our audience, but I was, to put it mildly, put off by the way that Rick Warren handled himself in this whole process. Um, I mean, he made some ridiculous comments from the floor of the convention, I believe, about just how he has trained and equipped more people for ministry than all of the rest of the Southern Baptist Convention seminaries combined and all this sort of stuff. And it just it came across as smug, arrogant, and full of himself in that context. Did
It,
you have a similar reaction?
yes, and that does not make a person right on every issue or any
Correct.
issue.
Correct.
But that seems to be the argument he's making. The fact that he's trained people makes him right on everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
When in reality nobody's right on everything, and
Yeah.
we need to be okay. Like I affirm this, but I don't affirm this in conversations about
Yeah.
people.
Well, I mean, it's the epitome though of a pragmatic argument. Just look
Mm-hmm.
at the big numbers. I have to be right. Like, how can you argue with my big numbers? You know, that sort
Yep.
of thing.
Yep.
Yeah, I think this is something, this in one sense was the most high profile issue in terms of Rick Warren's Saddleback Church, but this is an issue that's still festering in the Southern Baptist Convention in terms of women pastors and how the Baptist faith and message functions within the SBC. Um, I heard a good explanation as because from the outside, we're both outsiders to the SBC, even though we
which,
consider,
which is a blessing in this moment, right?
yeah,
When discussing this, yeah.
yeah. But I mean, we appreciate and value the SBC. We love a lot about what's going on in the SBC.
Yep.
Not everything, but in any case, it's a good analogy I heard as people from the outside try to figure this out. Um, the SBC can't tell any of its member churches what to do directly. That's not how the denomination is structured. But they can say who can belong to the
Mm-hmm.
SBC. So I think that's a helpful distinction that it's not like Al Mohler and his cronies can get in a room and say, okay, that church has to do this. But the convention as a whole, with all of its delegates, can say, yeah, you can't be one of us because of where you stand on these issues. All right, how about the next one, John? Why don't you take that one?
Okay. Pro-life movement regroups after electoral setbacks. So basically, in the wake of Roe v. Wade being revoked, this issue's been thrown back to the states, and states have been passing laws like crazy. And not all, but a number of perceived losses for the pro-life movement have taken place.
Yes. It is pretty striking. And I think the more responsible pro-life folks have always made this clear that overturning Roe versus Wade, while crucial, important, valuable, is nowhere near the sort of ultimate end goal. As if now that that's accomplished, the pro-life movement is just going to be like, oh, well, hey, I mean, we did what we wanted. Now it's over.
Yeah.
And the more responsible advocates have made it clear this just moves the discussion back to the states in terms of legal actions, but even just more broadly. And this is, I think, what's concerning to me is that these sort of setbacks for the pro-life movement tend to reflect a larger culture that is not ready to get serious about putting an end to abortion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's shown in polling, where I think we see, which you and I would be some of the most staunch advocates in for pro life. But we're probably in the what 15-20% range of the country, where it seems like most people in the United States, the majority seem to be at the 12 to 16 week mark.
That's probably right.
Uh, and yeah, overturning Roe hasn't led to the decline in abortions, I think, that we anticipated. I think we've seen something of a leveling. Is the numbers that the articles that I've read seems to have led to it lowering in some states but rising in
Yeah.
others.
I think
Uh,
that's that's an important caveat. I think
mhm.
maybe nationally, but I mean, for example, in Texas, it has absolutely fallen through the floor in terms of number of abortions. So I
Yes.
do think it varies by state, really, in terms
Mhm.
of the effect that this has had, for sure, in terms of actual numbers of abortions.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's a whole lot of politics around this. The government paying for people to go across state lines in order to get abortions, or states paying for people to cross state lines to get abortions, things like that.
Well, and even the availability now of drugs that induce
Yeah.
an abortion, and whether it's legal for states to say, no, you live here in Texas, which means you can't buy medication and have it shipped from wherever, Louisiana or wherever. So those are some of the ongoing aspects of the larger pro-life movement for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's becoming an issue that's, I think, divided the conservatives, broadly speaking.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's true. Number 8, I'm a little surprised this wasn't a little higher, to be honest.
Yeah, very
Uh,
very Colin Hanson, you know.
yeah, Timothy Keller dies. That's story number 8. Um, I This is an odd sort of. I remember where I was when I found this out. Do
Hmm.
you?
I think I was at home. I think I was working at
Okay.
home that day. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this happened on the day that I was returning from my Go Encounter trip from
Oh.
Brussels.
Hmm.
And I had I had seen uh I had seen indications that he was in his last hours slash days, that he was in in very poor health. And then you get on the airplane, you're in the air for, you know, 8, 10 hours.
Unless you pay for the Wi-Fi, you know nothing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, and I land and I'm checking, as I'm waiting in line at O'Hare to go through customs, like, oh my gosh, Tim Keller died. So, um, I think I'm just surprised that he put this at number 8. I mean, he wrote the biography on,
And, and it's on the website that Keller had a founding role.
yeah, in the Gospel Coalition. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I suppose that's probably his measured approach in terms of understanding Keller's popularity within a slice of
Hmm.
evangelicalism versus, maybe the whole spectrum of church and culture and all that sort of stuff. Why don't you do the next one here, John? I know it's your
Uh,
favorite topic.
uh, Fears of Christian nationalism focus on a new speaker. Um, I so I want to break this one in half. You know, there's fears of Christian nationalism. This is the third year in a row. I went back and looked at the last 2 years. 2 years ago, I think Christian nationalism was like number one or number two in his list, and then last year there wasn't the words Christian nationalism, but it was definitely in there. And I
Mhm.
think, you know, he even mentions in this how a definition is very difficult to come to around
Yep.
Christian nationalism. He links a couple of articles. I really enjoyed Patrick Schreiner's article as well. Um, uh, so, you know, I think whether we can agree on a definition or not, there is something going on here with Christian nationalism. Depending on how you define it. I thought it was interesting, though, that he ties us to the new speaker who's come to bat. And I know he mentioned the
Mhm.
Bible in a particular interview, but I thought it was interesting to put the Speaker of the House on this list. What were your thoughts?
Well, I think that the big issue to me, which he acknowledges, is the inability to come up with a definition that can be widely embraced.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think I think the reason he mentions the new speaker is that he became a flashpoint for the lack of agreement on a definition.
Hmm.
Because I think as some people listen to what the speaker says, they think, so basically what he's saying is he tries to apply his Christian faith to his approach to government, to which I think a large chunk of Christians would likely say, good,
Yeah.
that's what you're supposed to do. And yet others hear that and they say, oh my gosh, he wants a theocracy. He he
Mm-hmm.
he basically wants to reinstitute Old Testament law and punish anyone who doesn't hold to Christian faith. Like, and again, that gets just to the bigger issue of to me, it's more of he's a sort of a Rorschach test of you see whatever you want to see in the speaker.
Yeah.
If you think Christian nationalism is broadly defined and it's the biggest threat in the history of humanity, then you see that in him. If you're a Christian who's like, well, I just think that your faith should inform your politics, then that's what you see in him. I just feel like everybody sees what they want to see in him, depending on what they already think about the relationship between politics and the Christian faith.
Yeah.
And that's not to say, I mean, and to be perfectly blunt, the reason that there's no, the fact that there's no definition of this is one of the main reasons why I don't want to talk about it on the podcast.
Now, in full transparency, have we had a conversation where we went like where I have pushed you or you have pushed me trying to talk about this on the podcast? I don't think we have.
No. Oh, no, no, no. No.
Okay. Okay.
But I mean, we do pay attention, obviously, to what's going on in the church and the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And someone, I don't know that anybody thinks this way, but someone could look at our lack of addressing this and wonder why in the world, if your podcast is in large part about what's going on in the evangelical church and what's going on in the world, how have you not talked about this? I I don't know that there's a ton of people out there like that, but I mean, this is why you cannot find even finding a definition that a large number of people can agree on is
Yeah.
difficult.
Even people
So
who claim to be a part of the movement itself, right? I mean,
sure,
when I scroll through comments on Twitter and those sorts of things, and I saw somebody put something up about politics and faith, and this guy
mm-hmm.
responded, "Nope, Christian nationalism is the way forward." And I just look at him and I go, "What is that? What does that mean? Are we theocracy? Are we
Yeah,
just sort of this? You
yeah.
know, I so yeah, I
But
hear you.
but then on the flip side, there's the like, here's a person who is just trying to apply, take it away from the speaker, for example. Someone who says, I think as Christians we should advocate for the unborn and try to create protections legally for them. Oh, you're a Christian nationalist. No. Like no. Like that's just a ridiculous like so it's become John, it's become like the term woke. It's
Hmm.
become like the even the expression critical theory. Like these terms have become buzzwords
But you fill with
that
ever
it,
meaning. Yeah,
yes, that
yeah.
people who don't necessarily understand what those terms actually mean, but they know they're bad, just want
Hmm.
to trot out there and say, "Oh, let's just lump that as that's woke, that's Christian nationalism," when it may not be. It may just be something that you don't like.
Yeah.
So that's the extent of our Christian nationalism discussion. Number six, that's you.
No, I did Christian nationalism. Number six is
You
you.
did? Oh, it's
Yeah.
me. My bad. You're right. High profile conversions suggest disenchantment with secularism. And he lists three, ironically, wait, are all three of those women? That first name is escaping me.
I think,
Ayan Hirsi Ali.
yeah, not sure.
Okay. And then Catherine von Drakenberg, and then Molly Worthen. Came to Christianity from divergent backgrounds. That's the first line of the explanation paragraph. So the this Hirsi Ali had been a leading spokeswoman. There it is. Well,
There it
spokeswoman
is.
of the new atheism. This von Drakenberg is a famous, apparently, tattoo artist on reality TV,
Okay.
turned away from witchcraft and occult. And Molly Worthen studied history and taught in the most prestigious American universities. So just the high profile conversions of these individuals.
Were these on your radar before you read this article?
I had heard of the first one, this Ayan Hirsi Ali, as because she was part of the new atheism crowd.
I appreciate you reading the difficult names rather than me in this instance.
But even in the descriptions of her supposed conversion, I'm not necessarily sure that it's a full blown born again experience.
Yeah.
That it might just be more of a, I think Christianity as an intellectual system is the most viable way to go kind of thing.
It's kind of like the David Brooks conversion of a few years ago, in that way, where
Could be, yeah,
in interviews he's going like, resurrection. Some days I do, some days I don't believe in it.
yeah,
Like, well, David, we need a little more commitment here. But
Yeah. So I'm not sure what to make of those. We should probably move on. We're need to pick up the pace here. Number
yeah.
5, John.
De-churching trends defies expectations.
Okay.
So there's a book that came out a couple years ago, maybe it was this year, about the great de-churching,
Hmm.
and talked about the church over the last 25 to 30 years, about the uh, church attendance. It was just dropping. Um, yeah, we done an episode on de-churching? I know we've done on like deconversion early on and things
We
like that.
I think we've talked about some of these changes in terms of the drops in denominational affiliation and some of those things. I feel like we've done an episode on this, at least partially. I mean, the summary paragraph points out a number of potential reasons for this, pointing out partisan politics, abuse scandals, and just as well, I think the anti-institutional spirit of our time. I think that's a big one.
I think that's a big one too. This is one we should probably do an episode on. We should
Eh,
probably uh do more on this, but I know we're running low on time, so why don't we jump to the next one?
Number 4, Gen Z shows signs of spiritual revival. So this this is I think in part he mentions here linked to the so-called Asbury Awakening back in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but uh, other signs as well. Um, I I don't know what to make of this one in general. I have the I feel like I've talked with enough people who are connected with ministry among Gen Z folks to say that there's probably something to this. What about you?
Um, I don't know. I did get to visit Asbury. We do have an alum that works at Asbury that I actually did a tour of campus, and he showed me where the revival took place. That was very cool.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. Some of the videos that came out of that Asbury Awakening were just particularly outside of the sanctuary and sort of like on the periphery.
Hmm.
Like I heard a story of, I think it was Denny Burke was like walking in and like a shawl was thrown over on him, and and if you know Danny, that's not his
Yeah.
scene.
Nope.
But I think once
Nope.
he got inside, he was doing just fine. So I don't know. I'm, on Gen Z, I take a wait and see approach because I think
Hmm.
Gen Z is just stepping into the workforce at this point. I think the what's the oldest Gen Z person? Is it 27,
Maybe. Yeah.
26? So we're just seeing them enter the workforce.
Yeah.
We'll see what. Let's take a wait and see on Gen Z. That's sort of my approach.
Yeah. Yeah. You're up, right? Number 3, or was
Yep.
that me? Okay.
Nope, that's me. Activists seek to change theology of sexuality from within Christian communities. This is the Andy Stanley and the Pope aligned one. So Andy Stanley opened up probably, gosh, what was it, Doc? A couple years ago, where he came out with his book, Questioning Inerrancy.
Hmm.
And then has sort of taken that and pivoted to a questioning of Orthodox belief of sexuality, and things like that. And then we had Pope Francis. Even this week? I mean, we're at the week of Christmas here,
Hmm.
and he just said it's okay for a priest to bless same-sex marriages, but not officiate or deny historic Christian marriages. And so we
Yeah.
have this really really strange thing. And Colin here makes the has kind of a nice summary statement where it says the overarching problem, whether from seeker sensitive evangelicals, music moguls, Roman Catholics, or a state church, is ministry philosophy that says theology must change to reach younger generations. And I think
Yeah.
that's a great um, summary of this problem.
Yeah. And it's at its heart, it's pragmatism.
Yeah.
It's pragmatism and it's cultural accommodation.
Yep.
So lots that could be said on that. Number 2, Chat GPT thrills, frightens tech futurists. Uh, Chat GPT is kind of a catch-all. I mean, I think that was early in 2023 when that kind of burst on the scene, or even late 2022, maybe.
It was this week in 2022. It was like December 18th or something like that.
So but I think just the general awareness of AI has gone from uh this sort of science fiction futuristic thing to, hey, some version of this is here.
Mm-hmm.
And the effects that's having on education in particular, but as well as the church. Those are big things, and I think, I mean, obviously when we get to number one, you'll see that barring the unusual circumstance of number one, I
Yeah.
think this would have been the number one story. And you might even say this at number two is actually potentially the biggest long-term significant one on the list. Others have been like the whole like pressures about marriage and that sort of thing have been around, but this feels like a new moment in terms of AI taking center stage or becoming such a massive issue in many parts of our culture.
Yeah. I mean, it's in some professions, it's doing work that they had previously done. Um,
Yeah,
and in some, I mean, I don't think it's to the point yet where it's doing work better than a human, maybe a lazy human, but but yeah, I mean, one of the problems we're having in education is students using it to write their papers, right? I mean, that's
yeah,
just a clear one. And doing historical research this way. Hey, what happened at this event? Give me a summary of this. And
right.
but I think it's here to stay also. And so, what do we do with it, and how do we engage it? I think that's a hard conversation.
Yeah, I don't think the issue is do we use AI or do we not use AI? I think the actual conversation is in what contexts do we use it and how do we use it, rather than an all or nothing kind of approach to the issue.
And then number one, Hamas attack on Israeli military and civilians receives unexpected support. So basically, the October 7th attack on Gaza definitely shook the world, certainly the Israelis. And then I think what's been most surprising, and he alludes to this, is the amount of support Hamas gets in the wake
Mm-hmm.
of this happening, particularly from elite universities in very, very blue cities. I know I saw on Twitter a city council in Sanford, in Oakland. It was Oakland, California, and they were saying that this was a false flag operation by Israel, and they either killed their own people or they just faked it, which is just really heinous and morally repugnant of the people of Oakland. Um, but yes, I think that's been interesting, and I I think the biggest one where I've gone like, what are you doing, has been the United Nations in all of this, and um, yes, I believe it took them 2 weeks to condemn the attacks on October 7th, something like that, maybe longer,
Yeah.
uh, and but but have regularly condemned Israel for its action around the world. So, yeah, anything you want to jump in and say about Hamas and Israel? Any quick
Um,
takes? Keep it
I,
under 30 seconds.
there you go.
Yeah.
I will say, I criticized earlier the use of blanket terms that people don't understand, but um, I do think that critical theory does help us understand some of these um, al alliances with people supporting Hamas because they're viewed as the oppressed.
Hmm.
And so, because they are categorized as the oppressed, they are exempt from moral condemnation in what they do. So I think that helps explain some in our culture that you might initially be surprised. How can you support what Hamas is doing, butchering human beings? And they say, well, they're the oppressed,
Yeah.
and we have to align with the oppressed in any scenario, and that justifies their barbaric actions. Again, not to say that Israel is perfect or has done everything right. They have their own issues and have made, committed acts that are morally wrong as well. So, but yeah, I think that in part explains what's going on. But well, that took us a while to work through, John.
Yeah.
There's a lot in there. There's a lot in there. But you ready to move on?
Sure, sure.
Time now for this day in sports history.
All right, this day in sports history, December 26th, day after Christmas. In 1919, the Yankees and the Red Sox reached an agreement to move future Baseball Hall of Fame pitcher and slugger Babe Ruth to the New York Yankees.
I mean, that's a pretty seismic event within sports history.
Yes, and Babe Ruth eventually goes on to just be an outfielder, but is one of the best baseball players that ever lived. Regularly threatened to quit baseball if they didn't pay him more money and go box professionally.
That'd have been interesting to see.
Yes. 1971, Muhammad Ali finishes off German Jürgen Blin with a thundering right cross for a 7th-round knockout in a non-title heavyweight boxing contest in Zurich, Switzerland.
Yeah. You ever been to Zurich?
Never been to Switzerland. No.
That's on my bucket list. Switzerland is for sure.
Yeah. Switzerland be a nice place to visit. I've heard wonderful things about the Swiss. I've met one Swiss man. 1900?
1990.
Oh, excuse me. 1990. Gary Kasparov. Did I get that right? Kasparov defeats fellow Russian Anatoly Karpov to retain the World Chess Championship.
Anatoly Karpov.
Okay, wonderful. I don't know if I consider chess a sport personally.
Well, the pickings were a bit slim for December 26th.
Interesting. 1991, future Pro Football Hall of Fame coach Chuck Noll retires as head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Was coach from 1969, 2 years after the NFL was formed, to 1991. That's a long time. 1969 and 1991.
Well, the Steelers have only had think about this. They had Chuck Noll for all those years, and then Bill Cowher took over.
Yeah.
And they had him for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have Mike Tomlin. I mean, they have been the picture of stability when it comes to head coaches in their franchise.
Oh yeah. And you want to know what? The Dallas Cowboys were very much on that trajectory with Tom Landry. They could have had something similar. But then Jerry Jones bought the team and started hiring and firing people like crazy.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
And it's been doing that ever since.
Yeah, who do you like out of that list?
Maybe Chuck Noll. I mean, that's
okay.
That's just impressive to be the coach from 1969 to 1991.
And it's certainly somebody that we have not used before.
Yeah. We may have used the Babe before.
I'm sure we have.
And Muhammad Ali.
I'm sure we have. I don't know about Gary Kasparov, but you're hating on chess. So,
well, no. I don't hate chess. I just don't think it's a sport.
Okay.
Anything you wear a 3-piece suit to is not a sport.
Okay. Well, I mean, if you look back to how Tom Landry dressed on the sidelines,
but he's a coach. He's not a participant. He's not an athlete.
Okay. Okay. I mean, yeah. Okay. I guess coaches, which again makes it ridiculous that in baseball, the manager / coach wears the uniform. That's ridiculous.
That's ridiculous. Like in case there's a big problem, he's going to step in and play.
Right. Right. All right. One thing you liked.
I have been reading the little classic book On the Incarnation by Athanasius. Have you read that book before? The On the Incarnation by Athanasius?
Long time ago.
Wonderful little introduction by C.S. Lewis. That's about, gosh, probably half the book. But great read. And I'm trying to start a new Christmas tradition of reading it every year. And it's been really, really good.
Nice. I'm going to go with a book as well. This one by Tony Reinke called God, Technology, and the Christian Life, which I suppose is appropriate in light of one of the stories on the list today.
Yep.
I think his approach is incredibly level-headed on these issues. He's not a, wow, technology is fully amazing and has no issues, as well as he's not a, I'm going to be a neo-Luddite who basically is like, I'm rejecting all technology and going to go fully analog on everything. But part of what's great about what he does is his understanding of how God's sovereignty works within and through technological advances and things like that. So I think it's an excellent read on that subject. That'd probably be my go-to book now on the subject. It's a little longer, but I still think it's very readable.
Sounds like it's due for a new edition with ChatGPT coming out. And
this came out, I mean, came out a year ago. It's like a year or two ago, probably 2 years ago now.
That's one of those things, though, that you could almost update every 2 years.
Yeah, but it's not dependent on specific technologies, right?
Yeah.
And so his approach is not like, oh, I have to say everything I could about this particular kind of technology. It's the big picture approach to technology. So that is my one thing I liked. Well, John, we've gone a little bit longer than normal. I suppose that's appropriate as an end of the year episode, right? I mean,
yep, I think so.
208 consecutive weeks of publishing content.
And Lord willing, it'll be 209 when we get back from Christmas.
Lord willing, indeed. During the first week of January. So 4 years. That's way more. I mean, if you think about it, that's probably like at least 150, 160 hours of content that we've produced. Yeah.
You know, at some point, one of us is going to be hospitalized for a while, and we're not going to get an episode out. Although the other could do it and just publish an episode. Hey, pray for my co-host. They're down.
You could. Good. I don't anticipate any hospital stays anytime in either of our futures. We're both healthy people.
Who does anticipate hospital stays, though? Who's like looking at their calendar like, well, the third week of July would really be ideal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, who knows? I mean, Hurricane Sloat is coming to town, John. So,
yeah,
with all the revelry. All right. We have talked favorite sports memories from 2023. We have talked the top 10 theology stories of 2023. We have talked about Chuck Noll coaching the Steelers for a long time. We've talked about On the Incarnation by Athanasius and Tony Reinke, God, Technology, and the Christian Life. So I think by definition, we have discussed our various and sundry topics. And all that's left to say is, until next time, the Lord bless y'all real good.
Later.